Mike Alexander's 67 Camaro is just like the one his older brother let him drive as a teenager.
I used to get in some street races with it, and I really enjoyed that.
Frank Pointe has wanted this Citroën since he learned the Nazis stole his grandpa's Traction Avant in 1945.
It has a lot of class, it has a lot of character, it has a lot of French flair.
Cool cars, good people, great car stories. This powerful 1967 Chevy Camaro is a special car to Mike Alexander.
My older brother had one, and he used to let me take it out and drive it. And I'd go cruising with it, and it was just good memories.
Mike grew up idolizing his older brother, Greg.
He was 7 years older than me, and he liked cars. He was in a rock and roll band. He did all that stuff. And then when he had the Camaro, I'd help him work on it, and he'd let me take it out driving. And I'd cruise around with it, and his car was a fast Camaro, 4-speed, and I used to get in some street races with it, and I really enjoyed that.
This car is really special to Mike because it takes him back to his teenage years. When he was 17, his brother owned a 67 Camaro.
Mike's world changed when Greg died suddenly while fighting a fire on his property.
Unfortunately, I lost my brother in the mid-90s. So a couple years later, when this came up, I just had to have it, and I'll always keep it for that reason.
It's been 20 years since his brother passed now, but owning this car really brings special memories of the time he was with his brother.
Fast forward to today, I've got a 67 Camaro. I think of him, and it's a small block, 4-speed standard car, just like his.
The Camaro was introduced in 1967 as Chevy's answer to the Ford Mustang that was killing the competition in the pony car market.
You know, here at Chevrolet Styling, we live and breathe new ideas. The Camaro is a good, honest piece of sculpture. From any angle, the car has a dynamic shape. The look of today, with no compromises and no excuses. The Camaro is truly a product of the space age.
The Camaro was brought out by Chevrolet in 1967 to soothe all of the tens of thousands of Chevrolet fans who had been suffering from watching Ford produce the Mustang, a wonderful car to which Chevrolet had no answer. Those Chevy fans had been sitting there for 2 years wishing Chevy would produce something similar, trying to restrain themselves from buying a Mustang.
The sporty Camaro was an immediate hit.
Many other brands brought out cars at this same time, but Camaro had the advantage of having this big base of Chevrolet fans who dearly wanted to have a car to beat the Mustang with. And a Camaro could do that.
When Mike got his Camaro, he took it apart.
So I bought it in, I believe, October of 1997, and then I went right into it. I replaced some panels, and I painted it. I do all my work myself. Panel replacement, prep, paint, color sanding. I do everything myself. When I repainted this car, I replaced both quarter panels and a door skin and a few other areas that were getting suspect of rust, but not to that point yet. But the reason I did that is because I wanted it to look good for a long time. And just fast forwarding to today, the paint looks the same as it is when I painted it in 1997, so it was a good choice.
This car is an extremely easy car to restore, renovate, or modify because there's a ton of parts, old stock parts, reproduction parts, parts that would fit it now that nobody would ever have dreamed of in 1967.
Mike has a history of race car driving, so he made the Camaro track ready.
The larger back tires is for traction purposes because I will drag race this car occasionally and I need to get off the line. The front tires, they're a thinner tire and that's less rolling resistance. Another thing about that is that's the look that I like. So even if I didn't drag race this car, I would have this style of tire combination.
This Camaro is a good example of what you could call a resto mod. In other words, it's a car that enjoys the style and the styling and some of the features of the way it came out originally. But under the skin, it has been very much modified and modernized.
I have switches under my dash, and basically that's for my electric fuel pump, my electric fan. I have one for my line lock. What the line lock does is lock the front tires so that I can warm up the back tires prior to racing. I also have a launch control switch there so that my RPMs do not get too high when I'm leaving on the line. This particular tachometer, it's the old Sun Super Tack, 10,000 RPM tack with the chrome cup. I watch that when I'm racing, when I'm shifting, so that I don't get too high in my RPMs. So as I go through the gears, I usually shift about 6,500 RPM, so I keep an eye on that. And you can't buy those anymore, and that's all part of this car, the theme of the old Camaro.
Mike even keeps a Pine air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror.
I had a friend with a Camaro, and he used to have air fresheners all across his dash, and you could barely breathe in there. But when I get in my car, it takes me back to that all the time.
Coming up, Mike freshens up the pavement in his '67 Camaro. Franck Point's family lived in occupied France during the Second World War. His grandpa was always sorry that the Nazis confiscated his Citroën Traction Avant.
I always remember when I was a child, my grandfather talking about that car, taking my mom as a child herself for holidays and the whole family there.
When Franck moved to Canada, he hoped to one day have a car like the one his grandpa loved.
It's a car that you just consider part of the family, just like these cousins or uncle you heard all your life, never had a chance to meet with them. What you want to do is, when you grow up, is to meet with that person. It's exactly what happened to me. So I found a car in France on the internet. That was 5 years ago, the first time I saw the car. I had no money to buy the car back then. I had that car somewhere back in my mind. When I had the chance and the money to buy it, I just did it. And he went back on the market. So a year after, I said, I really have to buy that car now. So I bought the car like 3.5 years ago, and it took like a couple of months to get the car shipped to Vancouver, where we arrived like 3 years ago.
This car is a little bit like him. It has a lot of class, it has a lot of character, that's a lot of French flair.
The Traction Avant was an expensive car in its day, and financial pressure cost André Citroën control of his company.
Because André Citroën, the owner, spent so much money in building the manufactory to make those cars, he came to a point where he had no more money to give the money back to the bank. So Michelin, the tire company, being the first shareholder of the company, decided to take over Citroën just to make sure the company will not bankrupt.
This car is made in 1953, but it was actually in production before the Second World War, which is astonishing when you look at the modern features on it.
The Traction Avant's rakish good looks and high performance made it a favorite with the German officer class. As the Nazis lost the war, dozens of them were shot off the road.
A lot of these cars didn't survive the war because they were used in the attempt to get away from the Allied forces at a time when Allied air power ruled supreme.
The French resistance also liked the speedy Traction Avant.
You do see pictures of them used by the resistance and the liberation forces with FFI, Free French Forces of the Interior, marked on the side.
Traction Avants became notorious again after the war when bank robbers used them to escape from police.
It was known in the 50s to be the car for the famous Traction gang. The reason why is because those cars will go faster than the police one, so we are lucky to see the front. Police will see more the back of the car trying to chase those guys.
After the war, French gangsters found that the Traction was essentially the equivalent of the Ford V8, in that it was much faster than anything the police had to chase them with.
One day, Franck and his friend Jean-Pierre decided to dress up as the famous Traction gang.
What we did, we actually put our sunglasses and a large hat, and then we had some rifles, plastic rifles, of course, hanging out of the door. And probably somebody saw us, and they called the cops, and 2 blocks later, and we were just stopped by the cops, and that was funny.
Franck Citroën is a 15.6, the most powerful model in the Traction Avant line.
That's the signature of that car, this Traction Avant 15-6. This is a grid that, on which you can see the chevron, which is the logo from Citroën. This model was for the people looking for a better car with more power, with a 6-cylinder, with more space in the back for people, as well as better interior design and covering on the seats.
It was a unit body construction, which is the way most cars are made now. It was front-wheel drive, which is the way most sedans are made now. It had modern design in terms of moving the wheels to the corners of the vehicle to maximize the interior space. Altogether, a remarkable automobile.
So that's a very simple engine. It's a 6-cylinder straight. It's a 2.8 liters engine. That engine allows the car to go up to 135 km per hour. The second originality of the car is the transmission to the front wheel. The last one is the design of the car itself. The car, unlike the other one, before that one, it comes in only one unibody shape. The other car before came with first a chassis on top of it with a body.
The Citroën has a very low center of gravity. Why is that?
The reason is because the power is on the front wheels, not in the back. When you have the back transmission, you need to have this column here that obliges you to raise the car a bit in its design. When André Citroën was working on that car, his intention was to get the car as low as possible because for him that was the future of the car.
This car matters because it is a real groundbreaker, a real trailblazer of technology, long before we ever think of these technologies as being usable in a production automobile.
Fact shows that actually André Citroën was right because after Traction Avant, all the cars came from Renault, Peugeot, were all following the same idea, having a very low gravity center.
After the break, Frank turns heads in his Traction Avant.
When you drive the car, everybody is looking at him. I think they're probably looking at the car.